I'm Andrew Southworth, and this is My Point 4 Cents.
Hey, I'm Rob McDermott.
And I'm Matt Bacon, and today we're talking with Linkin Park's former manager, current manager of Bloodywood, From Ashes to New, many other cool projects, Rob McDermott, about Linkin Park's origin story, how to build a street team, and after the paywall, the modern-day legends, Angine de Poitrine. This is going to be a fun one. So yeah, Rob, since you're on the show today, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to these last 30 years?
Oh no, speaking about myself. Yeah, it's only been that long. It feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
Nah, let's see. Gosh, you know what? I've considered myself very. It's really weird when you have to talk about yourself like this, but I consider myself very lucky to have. I've worked really hard, but I got into. I was a kid that grew up in my teenage years with the late '80s. So, like, if you think about all the amazing music from 84, 86, 88, that was, I was one of those kids at 14, 15, 16, 17, right? I'll still go to any Slayer show. I'll still go to an Iron Maiden show. Can't help but, most Metallica shows, sometimes they just get boring now. Well, when you've seen them, I don't know, 90 times, probably.
Shots fired, yeah.
No, I'm teasing. But I started as a kind of, the best way to say it is I started early in high school. I was putting together shows. I was in high school bands. By the time I turned 18, I was just like, I chose the industry side or staying a musician. And I was a bass player, and I was a mediocre bass player. I was solid, right? I could keep a groove. But, I eventually just said, you know what? I enjoy kind of putting the shows together and promoting the shows than playing them. And I took that kind of role. And, I did everything from working at college radio stations to, we had a 2,500 seat performing arts center at my college campus. I went to a place called CW Post on Long Island. The place was called Attila Center. And it was amazing because I then learned how to do crew for everything. Operas, ballets, rock shows came in. I was a trust spot operator for I think it was like a midnight oil show for that our school put on. I was the booking the booking kid for for our college. They call it the campus activities board. So I'd put together shows. Ceremoniously got myself fired from that gig early on, which was good. Running 60, 70 hours of hard rock metal radio programming. This is 90 to 93. Eventually just got myself an internship at Columbia Records, where I would just have to go into the city. And it was great because, again, back then they had these quote unquote metal departments. So I was able to kind of go in there and work and learn everything, right? In fact, one of my school papers was I interviewed my boss at how to set up a record, right, back at the time. And so that was good. So you kind of learn these things early. Realized I didn't really like the record company side of it. I spent about a year interning there, and then just made the list. Back then we had this giant thing called the Yellow Pages of Rock. It was a big book, and I just dug up every booking agency and management company I could find. And back then you just had to pick up the phone and call them. There was no. It was 1991. And
that was the year I was born.
I knew how. Wow, really? I'm still young though. I don't know how I stayed 29. But so 1992, all of a sudden, I just called a bunch of agencies, and this company called Concrete Management needed an intern, and I literally started a company that they were already managing Pantera, White Zombie, and Prong, and I had already been a kid being in the metal scene in New York. I'd already seen, and my then girlfriend at the time, we'd already gone to 91, 92, I'd already seen Pearl Jam at this 400 seat club and called Wetlands in New York, and the
legendary Wetlands.
Oh yeah. In fact, it's funny. I found a picture of myself. It's the only picture that exists of me as a fan, taken by like one of like the Getty Images people from behind, and you just see me and partly my girlfriend right in front of Eddie Vedder on the stage, and literally it's the only picture that exists of me as a fan. I was probably 19 years old or 20 years old at the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. It was fun when I discovered it when I was looking up that show, Wetlands. But then it just kind of got into working at concrete management with this amazing manager, this guy Andy Gould, who's still my friend and mentor to this day. Walter O'Brien, who is Pantera's manager, with Andy, and and this amazing woman Amy, who tortured me and made me learn everything properly. Right, got to give her always credit. And and it was fun. Like, it was just like, here I am. And I'm still taking classes at school, and I'm working a couple of days a week as an intern. And within a few months, they hired me because they needed someone. And all of a sudden, I'm still in my last. I want to say I had like a last year left of school, so I shifted all my school to Tuesday, Thursday, and worked Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was still interning. I was still working at the concert hall, right? So I'm doing all this stuff and the radio station, and I just did whatever happened. Right. And I still had time to kind of party at my school some nights. You were just able to just do it. I just ran with whatever kind of happened because I didn't know what I really wanted, but I had a knack for management is what I realized. Right. And I had realized it early, like I was saying with my bands, when I was in high school. And so that just kind of took me all the way. Long story short, lived in New York City for a couple of years. 1995, got moved out to Los Angeles to be closer to all the White Zombie and with Andy. And, by this point, I want to say the company also had Prong and The Obsessed by this point. Like, we had a couple of these other bands back from the 90s, so it was really cool.
I didn't realize you had The Obsessed.
Yeah, The Obsessed. I do. As Andy was so busy, as White Zombie was getting bigger and bigger, this is La Sexorcisto, and then going into Astro Creep, that era. Right, so as White Zombie was getting bigger and bigger, I was kind of found myself kind of learning more and more of how to handle The Obsessed and stuff like that. So I got really kind of closer to them,
That's cool because I've done a lot of work with Wino over the years.
Oh yeah, Wino, and back then it was Greg Rogers and Guy Pinhas and all these guys that were in. I don't even know if who's around anymore. I haven't seen them in forever, and I love Guy, but. And Greg, but I just, I really kind of cut my teeth, right? And I realized that I was good at certain things. I could make budgets, and therefore I was now in charge of budgets and starting to put stuff together and run all this and, putting together lists. And, again, this is 1992, 93, 94, and then into 95, I come out to LA.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure out what Obsessed era that was.
Yes, that was 93, The Church Within. Was that the record? 93?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was just pulling up the discography to double check.
It was Columbia Records, I believe. I think it was The Church Within. I think it was that era.
Yeah.
So one thing I find that I think will be notable for everyone listening to this or watching who has always said, like, I would like to work at this. I would like to do this job for this big band, right? Like, I want to manage big bands like this. You didn't just magically poof through some crazy connection. You got these opportunities. You started off interning at a label, and then you interned at a management company through college, and then eventually that led to a job, and then now you're actually like doing bigger work. Like, this was a thing that snowballed, and you didn't know what you wanted to do. You just took opportunities as they came. It wasn't this magical thing that you got one day.
No, you're right. You got to do everything, right? There's a couple of things, especially the way that everything's kind of structured now, right? I wish I could say the opportunities were just abound because, listen, everyone wants someone to help them for free, right? No one will mind that whatsoever. But it's just making sure that you're competent enough to understand what you have to do. But try everything, right? There are two things that I always say. Try everything and figure out what you like and meet everyone, and at the same time, the most important time to build when you get into the business, to build your relationships and friendships, I always tell everyone 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's when you're going to really, because you'll work with people all day long, but it's when you're hanging out with people that I know now, I'm saying 35 years now, right? For close to 35 years that I've known. I was hanging out with them in New York City as I was a college radio guy, right? And they were radio people, and they were, and then I end up running into them many different times. I have an old friend, Mike Ripberg, right? This guy he was at Metal Blade Records when I was at a college radio. Then when I had Static X, I'll talk about this a little later, Static X and Lincoln at Warner's. He was the head of rock at Warner's, right? And now he's like, I don't know, he's like a big guy at Hype, right? He was a big machine. Now he's like a huge guy at the distribution or global something for Hype. So this guy's done an amazing job for himself.
Yeah.
But I've known him that long, right? And you just know these people, and you just get to know them, and you're hanging out with them at night, and you get through them, and you do all this stuff. But I have tons of examples of everyone that you hang out with at night are the people that you really kind of stay with you your whole life. But
I always felt that way. I used to run like the punk house in Brooklyn where 5 bands would stay over a week. Oh. And it's funny how that was a decade ago, and it's funny how a couple times a year I'll get in touch with someone who's at a decent level now, and they're like, "Do you remember when I slept on your floor?" It's like, yeah.
Yeah, the relationship thing is real because you never know what's going to happen. I had a funny situation last week where I found out this big merch fulfillment company for artists is in the same town I live in. So I hit him up. I was like, "You're in the same town as me. I would love to do a tour. This seems like just too big of a coincidence to not do a tour, do an interview in person, and stuff for the YouTube channel." Mm-hmm. Turns out we played a show together in 2006, and now he's the founder of this huge merch company, and I have my ad agency and my YouTube channel. And then another guy we played that same night is a decently large music lawyer. So it's this crazy thing. We all played a show together in 2006 as kids. Fast forward literally 20 years, and 3 out of the 5 bands that night are all working in the music industry. And a lot of people only try to build relationships when it's oh, I want to collab with this big artist or whatever. But if you just make friends with people and you're just a good hang, as Matt likes to call it, you never know what's going to happen in the future. I think the message is kind of meet people, network, have a good time, build friends. Don't just meet people because you think it might be a good opportunity.
Well, don't be too good for anything, right? You know what I mean? When you're growing and you just want to do it, there was a time where I was interning at Columbia, at Concrete Management, and something happened with one of the gas gauges on our equipment truck. So I literally, they sent me to Chicago to drive back this equipment truck back to New York, right, with a broken gas gauge. So I had to sit with a piece of paper and jot down, okay, every 150 miles, when do I have to get gas? I had to kind of this whole thing of but I did it. And they're like, all right.
That's amazing.
Well,
that's
and
so
they did that
insane.
right. They go, here's $800. You keep what you don't spend. Right? It's that type of thing, right? And I was like, all right, I can figure this out. And I took an Amtrak to Chicago, and I'm 21 years old. I don't care, right? I did anything, and and you know what? Halfway through, I was like, I could do this. And I just did a 14-hour straight run back from Chicago to New York, right?
And you didn't run out of gas at all?
Well, I had to stop at gas every...
Well, yeah, I know, but I'm saying
you did a good enough job. I never ran out of gas because I made sure I was really conservative on it. And you just remember these things. These things stick in your head.
Yeah.
And the crazy downpour that I went through all of Indiana. It was nothing but you couldn't even see in front of you. I was like, oh, great, this is fun.
So you're kind of just saying yes to opportunities, you're meeting people, and then you're working at this management company. Is that when you ended up becoming Linkin Park's manager?
Yeah,
later on?
Yeah. So what happened was Andy Gould, who's again still a friend 30 years later, right? And I was his intern and his assistant. When we got to LA, it was all White Zombie, and then we did everything from Monster Magnet to Powerman 5000 to, I discovered Static X in the clubs. They were called Static at the time. We named them Static X. I had this kind of more I never really made it band called Ultra Spank from the late 90s.
That is an extremely 90s band.
Yeah, what a great band name. Yeah, right. Rob Zombie named them. They were called Spank. They were actually from Santa Barbara. Them and Snot, the band Snot, were coming up together.
Yeah.
In the late 90s. and we couldn't call him Spank. It was such a common name, so we had to figure. So one day, Rob Zombie's just call him like Ultra Spank 44. Just totally being like facetious and just screwing around. And so we ended up calling him that for a second, and then just dropped it to Ultra Spank. And but again, it was this whole thing where Andy and all the zombie and then Rob Zombie stuff was going on, and then we just picked up more and more acts. In the '90s, we were doing so many different things, and then what that kind of fast forward a little bit now, we're at like 1999, and now I'll go to with the Lincoln side of it. There's a guy named Jeff Blue who really discovered them and kind of nursed them and for a couple of years. And, literally he'd done like 4 or 5 showcases where every label came and every label passed. Right. And he's gone through, and they had another singer before Chester had joined the band. Which funny enough, I don't know if he'll appreciate that I'll name drop him, but his name's Mark Wakefield. He's actually the Deftones manager now. He was actually, he's literally the original Chester. So,
I was gonna say, like, on one hand, that must feel like a bummer. Like, oh man, I was almost the singer of this. Like,
he's so
but
smart.
He's
Mark's
now the
such
manager
smart.
of Deftones, which is like still like that's such an. I love Deftones. That's a
yeah. He's a great manager too. He works over this company Velvet Hammer, System of a Down, and Korn, and all those guys, and so he's an amazing manager. But he back at that time they had gotten turned down by everyone. And, they were about to sign. What happened was Jeff moved from a publishing company called Zomba to Warner's, and he took the band with him. They never really got signed. Jeff brought him along with him. And then they were looking for managers, and he reached out to Andy just to ask him about it. And Andy's like, you should talk to Rob. You ever meet Rob? And then we got introduced, right? Jeff and I. Jeff was like, I'd heard your name, blah, blah, Static X, Warner's. I had a good relationship with them. And then I met with the band. I met with Jeff and Chester first. And I just looked at Chester the first time. He's just scrawny dude with glasses. I'm like, you do not look like your voice. When I first saw him. And I was like, wow. And so I met with him, met with the band. And, and I believe I had gotten it because the goal was community and just getting into it together and building this kind of fan base that's really there. And I think that's probably why I became their manager, was that they saw what I was doing with street teams. And we also had Typo Negative for a record. We had Typo Negative on the World Coming Down record. Andy and I managed them. So, so that was like 99 or something like that. And then I was also managed Cold for a little while. At certain points I managed Junkie XL for a year. I don't know if you remember Junkie XL from.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had a great album called Saturday Teenage Kick that they put out in like '97. It was before he became like this amazing composer guy, right? He kind of on that, but he had this record that was on Roadrunner. So, and so we just. By the way, this is part of my job right now that you have to forgive me for a second. I have to now look at something that someone told me I have to look at it quickly. Hold on one second.
All good. We have Jesse coming on in 5 minutes to talk with us about community building with you.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. So I apologize. This is the part of management that we always have to deal with sometimes. There's actually, with Bloodywood coming and merch is shipping from all over the place to kind of meet up with them. This is the job. So,
no worries. This is
why and somebody's giving me crap that just sucks all around. This is part of management, by the way. Shit. Fuck. All right, sorry. So this is just it in management. So.
Yeah, no problem, man. Feel free to take a couple minutes. Like, as I said, we can cut out this.
So yeah. Or you could just watch a manager kind of going through the bullshit that they have to.
This is the real.
This is what happens. A lot of it is
you're
staring at your screen, and all of a sudden something pops up in the corner of your screen. And you're like, fuck, I got to deal with that one. we ended up like all of a sudden we have this great company, right, called Andy Gould Management, and we're going through it. And I meet with the Lincoln guys. I meet with them a couple of times, and I become their manager. And so I first met with them in October of '99, and I became their manager officially in February 2000. Um, and then they go into, my first job is putting together the recording budget for Hybrid Theory, which they start recording the next month because there was never been a
Yeah.
finished recording
I
budget
was going
for
to
it.
say that was because the Hybrid Theory, did that come out in 99 or 2000?
2000.
2000.
Yeah, Hybrid. We
2000.
recorded it Hybrid, and this is where it got really kind of crazy because it just showed up. But during that time, and this kind of goes a little bit into community building. During that time, the band had built this little small group of people that they would just all of a sudden they'd send music to, right? And they would check it out, or they had this little Hybrid Theory EP that they had made. Yeah, I know they reissued it at some point, but they had made this little they made this group of songs, and they were kind of handing them out, right? Selling them slash handing them out. And so they built and they started collecting names, right? You just start collecting email addresses at shows and you play these random things. And so then they just started handing out cassettes. And when I came on board, I asked the label, I said, "Can we just make some?" Yes, it was cassette samplers at that time.
Surprised that
Yeah,
like early
yeah,
like
2000. Yeah, it was still
2000
2000s. It was still
CDs
the
weren't
tail end, the real
mainstream.
tail end of, you know, CDs, cassettes. Everything was kind of mixed in together in that late '90s, early 2000s, and then switched.
CDs were kind of expensive when they first came out, right? Like now they're like the cheapest form of physical media you can press, but I don't think they were
What
from day one. So as CDs,
CDs?
right now
Yeah,
they're
I
the
mean,
cheapest physical form of media, but I don't think they were when they were
they
new.
were. It was still inexpensive to make it. It wasn't as cheap. Believe me, the labels at that point they were making money hand over fist, right? Selling CDs
Yeah.
for $15, probably making them for dollar 20 with a high level insert, and wholesaling it
Mm.
for $7 or $8 or maybe even $10, right? Sometimes, right? Believe me, they were doing
So
just fine
it
with the
was actually
structure
pretty
and,
cheap for
and
them.
paying the bands a 15% royalty. 15 to 18. And that was what it was, right? But so so I became the manager in February. We start making Hybrid Theory in March. And then by the time we're done recording it in April, and it was a hellacious process, right? Because the head of A&R, Jeff's boss at the time, and I'm sure this is stuff a legend that you've heard bits and pieces, did not like the band. This guy, I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't even give him credit for his name, David. I forget his last name, but he was useless a hole is what I'll say about him. Um, but and I'll still say it to his face. But he was that guy that like kept trying to do everything he could to the rapper's not good enough. We're like, well, that's the chief songwriter, so tough shit. You know what I mean? Like it was like stuff like that. It's like, oh, well, we should try this, try that. We need less of him, more of Chester, and we're like, no, we're not going to, right? So, um, and at the same time, we were just going through this entire process. Jeff actually wrote a book. I think it's called One Step Closer. If you ever read that, it's pretty accurate as to what that whole time frame was from him before and then when I came on and to the time that unfortunately I'm the one that this poor guy discovers the band and I'm the one who has to let him go, right? That's the fun part of management eventually, you know?
Mm.
So brings me in and everything like that. I still feel, to this day, you still harbor that. Like this guy was always, he was there for them. But, that's the business that we're in, right? It happens. And so we get in there March, April. Now we're in May. And now I'm just like, okay, now we've got to go through. Now they're called Hybrid Theory still at the time, right? And
Right.
Warner, I'm trying to speed this up. Warner's just like, there's a lot of hybrids. There's hybrid the record label. There's hybrid the dance band. There's this or that. And I'm like, they're like, you got to change the name. We're like, what? All right. So then we went through this whole entire process for a few weeks. The worst names ever. The worst names ever. I want to say the one that always sticks with me. I want to say they called themselves Plear, Plear at one point, and it was a
Mm.
horrible I forget what it was amalgamation of, but we're just like. And all of a sudden, then one day, Chester's just like, "Hey guys, I think I got it." I think, what about Linkin Park? He's like, there was a place in Santa Monica, California, a park called Lincoln Park, and he was like, I hang out there, or I go there. What he really didn't tell us was that he was sleeping in his car some nights there, not telling the guys that he didn't have a place to stay when he first met them. And so, but that was. Then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we like that, right? And then all of a sudden we're like, well, the presidential spelling you can't really get, so we're like, all right, let's just flip around and play around with the name, right? So
Add a
that's
K to
how
make
that's
it more
how I
edgy
came
for
up
the
with it
time.
that way. And all of a sudden now we're in May, and it's fun for me because I have a lot of files from that era, so I even found the email where I'm telling the label, oh, by the way, we got LinkinPark.com. Oh, and by the way, the album name is Hybrid Theory. Because I had told the band, I go, listen, the people that know you as Hybrid Theory, just name the album Hybrid Theory, right? It's a very simple thing. That way, you're keeping this name recognition going for whatever small group of people knew about you beforehand. You know, because they played a couple of shows as Hybrid Theory. They played in Arizona, where Chester was from. They played LA a little bits and pieces, more like the showcase stuff that Jeff was trying to do. But there were fans there. I think they opened for like
Yeah.
SX10, which was like Sendog from
Sure.
Stifers had a band back in the late '90s. Um, and
So
so I'm trying to think. So now it's getting going
so
though, because all of a sudden we're
yeah.
like, all right, now we have the record. The record is recorded come May, and all of a sudden we're just like, um, we were going through the process, and all of a sudden we're like, all right, let's start getting some cassettes out, right? Let's get a couple of tracks out. Let's start vibing this out and getting it out there. And so we start handing stuff out, and at the same time, I'm sending it to agents because we don't have an agent. They don't have anything. Right now, we're like, okay, the record should come out in February. Let's get some tours, and the record could come out in February of 2001, right? And we'll just build this whole thing up. Well, what happened was all of a sudden I turn on to an agent friend of mine, Michael Arfin, who was with them for a long time as their agent afterwards, and not only is he this is May, and he's like, I got a tour for you in July. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, this band Union Underground, they're on Columbia Records, want you to open for them, and I'm like, all right. So literally, we're like, and we still have to mix the record, and so we're mixing the record with this guy Andy Wallace in New York, and I'm like, guys, and we got to do this before July. We've got a tour, our first tour, and we're like, all right, let's try and put together like a tour EP of a couple of songs, do that so we can at least just get the band name out there and slowly build it up, and then all of a sudden things just start kind of spiraling. We start sending out these cassettes. These kids are the feedback that's coming back off these kids are just like, holy shit. I need more of these to hand out to my friends, right? I need more. I need
Yeah.
more. I need more. And so they keep kind of, and then the label at the same time is like, well, maybe we should schedule a song. We're like, well, no. And so then they played at one of these, the record companies back then or radio always had these conventions, right? And they'd always have these smash or trash thing where a record company plays music or presents music in front of a whole bunch of programmers, right? And says, hey, what do you guys think of this? Well, they played One Step Closer for them, right? And this is like, now we're in July. We're on that tour. This is like July. And they're just like, everyone's like, we got to have this. And so this is where it gets murky as to what really happened because the label was doing its thing, but then program directors at each radio station were then telling each other. Some of them were telling each other about this song. And One Step Closer then grew a life of its own. And I'm sitting here going, I'm building a groundswell. I'm building a base right now of people.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are doing that. Keep doing that. I'm focusing solely on people, right? I need to focus solely on fans. Fans need to hear more and more of this. And, of course, your brain probably gives me the most cheery versions of all of this, but this is what really was kind of like, what we were truly building. And it just took on a life of its own. And all of a sudden, by August, I want to say it was early August, the president of the label at the time, this guy, Phil Corderaro, who unfortunately has passed away. But he calls me into his office and he's just like, hey, dude, we've got to put this out. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, we got to put it out in October. I'm like, October? It's August. Remember, we don't even have an album coming,
Yeah.
right? So all of a sudden now all this stuff's going on, and then all of a sudden I get them the Cottonmouth Kings tour, which is starting in September, right? They were just first on. They were just the first on band or the opener for all these things. But this was just kind of touring and things that I was getting them. Um, and it just kept going. And all of a sudden, by the time we got to October, we I don't know, we sold like 45,000 records the first week, you know, which by then was unheard of. But then a few years later, I was going to say Puddle of Mud, I think, just blew that out of the water. I think they sold like a crazy.
Yeah, but then I think Reanimation did like 270, right? So
Yeah. Then all of a sudden, Reanimation.
So
it just kept.
But okay. So
Yeah,
what I
I
wanted
don't
to
even
get
know where to
into.
go or what that was. I just wanted to kind of catch you up on.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting because what I wanted to get into then is like, so it's starting, and the big thing was a lot of the community building tactics you did. Can we talk about that? And let's talk about what it looks like now. Because obviously you've kind of gotten to this place where you're working with Bloodywood and From Ashes to New, where it's like very relevant new bands. What does that community building process look like on your end?
Yeah.
Starting with Linkin Park, and like, I would love to have a conversation about that with Jesse involved if we can get him back in. And
Ta-da.
yeah,
I figured, the only way I could do something more boring today than what I was doing, talking to DOJ lawyers about antitrust and Spotify, would be to come on and talk about a French band of polka dots with you guys.
well, we want to talk about.
That's the next segment.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good.
But we're on community building now. So like,
Our community building with Linkin Park, which is
Oh my god.
spoiler alert. I mean, I don't know if I said this. Linkin Park is one of my favorite bands of all time. So, Rob, good job. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like you're kind of like a very big part of this thing, which is like a huge part of my childhood, which is kind of wild. So I guess thanks for bringing it to the world.
Yeah.
Even my pretentious indie rock ass, who was like listening to nothing but the most insufferable Brooklyn hipster bands, turned to that record and went, "This fucking rules."
Yeah, it was just, and you know what? When you heard, I mean, it was kind of fun too. I'll dig a little bit deeper. When I had first gotten the demos from Jeff Blue, and I played them for my boss partner Andy Gould, and he's like, I don't really care about rap and by rock. He's a big metal dude, right? Like that. And he's like, "Do you believe in it?" I go, "Yeah, I fucking love it." He goes, "Well, then fucking do it." And it was like that because I could hear the mixture. I had heard someone doing that. I mean, I was a big fan of what of the Judgment Night soundtracks and all those type of things that came out in the '90s, and I loved the mixture of it, right? And so I just heard it, right? And I got very lucky that way because management's passion, right? You got to get it. You got to understand it because it's a lot of BS that you have to go through. So you have to make sure you're ready to go through that. And BS it was, right? In the early days, especially recording the record, but that's life, right? That's just what it is.
Yeah.
And
so what did that community, how did you build the community around Linkin Park?
So they had started,
and how are you building?
Right, the band was smart enough to in probably '99 or whatever, just start sending stuff out to random kids, right? The small group of people that they had. Jeff had an intern named Jessica, and Jessica ended up actually running the fan club for us eventually. But she was helping the guys, and they'd be sitting on their floors. This is just before me. They'd be mailing stuff out randomly to few. The 50 or 60 people they may have had. And then, we took that and we just supercharged it, right? We got in there because I was like, oh, I totally get this. I had done this. I had built Steam. In fact, going through my files, I actually found my email lists for Typo Negative when I had teams like that, for Static X when I had teams like that. And this is what we were doing. We were building stuff out in the late 90s the same way of how to get people interested, and I was starting to do a little bit of MP3 was starting to come out, so that's how I'd pass a few things around in like 98, 99. And it was really good, right? Just to kind of see, it was a lot of digging fans up. Back then when everyone had an AOL account, if you really dug into the member thing, you could find out sometimes the bands that they liked. And you're able to dig up the like-minded bands, and you would just randomly email them, "Hey, you want to check this band out?" And so you start there, and you just collect names, and then you start sending them stuff, and then they start asking for more, and then we start building this kind of street team setup, so to speak. Whereas we would go, okay, hey, if we send you, five or six, 5 or 6 cassettes, can you pass them around? And they'd be like, hell yeah. And and I there was one I have it saved somewhere. Where we got this note back, probably somewhere around like April or May, from a street team kid for one of the things. He's like, oh my god, I couldn't wait for the package. I'd heard the song, and I couldn't wait, to hand it out to my friends. And I handed it out to so and so and so and so, and it was this whole vibe. You just read this really nice email from this kid who's so pumped, so far ahead. Now remember, this is May. The record theoretically isn't till February, but the record ends up being October, so we're still that far out from people hearing things ahead of time to go evangelize, right? And so,
what was the main way you would get the actual email address from people? Like, was this like you'd meet them in person at one of these shows or showcases, and then you'd be like, hey, sign up. Like, can you give me your email?
Walk around with the email list, going, hey, sign up for it. I'll send you some stuff. Or I'll email you, and you just email them, thank you. It was real hand-to-hand combat, right? It was really, you're just in there and you're walking around, and you just we had this for Static X. It was this guy John, right? It was a friend of theirs. He did the merch, and he walked around with the mailing list, and he just got people to sign up, and we would literally just send them stickers in the mail, right? You'd spend the money, right? It costs a lot of money, even back then, to do stuff like that, to send out a postage. But I was lucky because I was at a good management company, so I would just be like, we'll run up the postage meter, we'll charge you back. So
what does it look like doing that now with like a Bloodywood or a From Ashes to New?
I don't get to do it. I'm actually really in the middle of reinventing how I kind of do it, because I believe and I believe that what artists should be doing now, and I hope to do it with one of my artists, is to find that platform, right? Let's just say, let's just say, if you want to do it, if I can talk as a manager, and what I think they should do is do something as simple as set up your SoundCloud, set it for monetization, hand it out, send it out early, right? Send it out privately to tons of people so that they can just stream it and just get feedback. Right? Get feedback before it. What happened, and I'm skipping ahead on it, but what I believe happened is in that 2007 to 17, and maybe it bleeds into each side a little bit more, everyone wanted DSPs to be the record store. That's what they truly wanted. They just didn't want you to have to deal with it. They wanted you to have to get it there and do that. And what happened was it took away the excitement of doing it any other way. And so now but what the DSPs really are is they're just radio. You just get it on there. That's all they are. Yeah. You're putting it up there. It's got maybe a 4-week shelf life if you're lucky. You can pump it a bit more. You can pump it there. All that is radio. I mean, when we were doing in the U.S. radio, obviously hard rock radio, a song can exist for 6 months if it wants to. Sometimes at least 20 weeks. Yeah, I can say. But internationally, everything was always set for, when you'd release a song internationally, you're like, it's an 8 to 12 week window. That's all you're going to get out of it, And that was then. That was then when everyone had to go to a record store to live with something, or go to a magazine to hear about you, where everything you had to, it was appointment everything. Now that it's on demand.
Yeah.
How do you get those people interested? Sometimes you just have to send it to them. I love what the Lalos and what all these other companies are starting to do, where they're collecting info, or you can DM something and they can start scraping and collecting all that information, right? Again, it was really funny when I found these email lists of a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand people from like 1999. I mean, obviously it's all like Earthlink and AOL addresses back then, But
those are the ones that really aged worse. Whereas you got 20-year-old Gmail addresses that you can get now, but that era of email, you got email rot just so much faster. Like even when I was collecting in 2010, the email address rot was so fast.
And you're like, what? You have Hotmail still?
I mean, my dad still has AOL.
My buddy Mike still has AOL. I mean, he doesn't use it as his main one, but it's really funny that he still has it. And
Jesse, because Jesse, you were managing Man Overboard in sort of that 2007-2017 period.
Yeah, in that period. I mean, but even before that, like I had the Escape Engine in the same era as Rob's talking about. Back in 2002, we were the band that was played the most on MTV that was on a DIY label with no one else. And, you know, a lot of what Rob is saying here, rang true, is that like what I was basically doing all day is like writing people emails, getting people's CDs in the mail every day and writing to the record label and going, I just spent $180 of postage, because back then media mail was like $1.10. And I would be just getting this to people all day and then be like, you owe me this much money. And, you know, that, and the record label was doing the same thing. The band was doing the same thing. We were just getting CDs into people's hands because we knew we had something that once people heard it, they really latched onto it, much like Linkin Park. Obviously, it didn't go as far, but we had a lot of momentum. So when you have proof of concept, that is the thing to invest in, is just how do I change gears and put all my time into getting more people to hear this?
well, and that's what it is, right? Listen, the truth is, this is what I always say. The mentality behind it has never changed. The way you like a song, the way you don't like a song, the way you grow into a song, the way you grow to dislike a song, that mentality towards it hasn't changed. Just because we changed the distribution methods or how we get it to you, but the way you feel about something, the way you don't feel, and the way you turned on to something, how excited you get telling someone about something you discovered, or how you get excited when someone tells you about something new, right? Especially those of us in it. That's what I believe we have to aim everything for, right? I wish I could find this note. I might find it and just randomly tell you during this, but just reading that note after 25 years that random kid had said just got me so jazzed again about why aren't we creating that? We want that feeling from someone. You know, you want to get that feeling from them, so that way they're just like, oh my God, hey, I felt this way about it. I felt that way about it. You know, I'm so bummed. I'm telling you, I'm going to find it. Because he was just saying, oh my God, I can't believe I love this song. I'm going to go send it to my friends, and I can't wait to hand them this and hand them that. How do you create that evangelistic vibe again from all these fans? And that's what I want to do. And that's why I'm happy that people are finally going through it. And what I was saying before is, from 2007 to 2017, everyone kind of like gave up. It was in that weird changeover period where everyone just relied solely on digital, right? And that's when vinyl didn't really pick up, but then all of a sudden it started to as like a collector's thing, and then got deeper and deeper. Then now people want a lot more tactility than they used to want, you know? But they're realizing what we've always known, right? You know, and it's fun to have that back there, right? It's fun to have the collection of vinyl that you can kind of, you know, go and live with it, and, you know, and have it, and, you know, and see the art, right? There were times I had a band a few years ago named Gemini Syndrome, and at their shows, I literally would buy, I would buy the CD booklets for 15 cents from the record label, right? And I would literally hand it out to anyone that bought merch. I go, because you need to see the art and read the lyrics. You need to have some version of what the band is from them, right? And I believe there's a version of that we're going back to. And I can't tell you what it's going to be. Someone's going to invent even a better idea the second someone comes up with one. That's the beauty of what we do and what goes on, you know? So, but you need that feeling. It's about a feeling.
There's this platform, Even, that's been getting popular over the last few years, where their big push is, before you push your music out to streaming, release it on Even to be available for purchase, to have like a couple month exclusivity. And even before that, and also since then, a lot of artists will, like, you know, they're coming out with an album and they have the whole thing done, and it's like they're trickling out the singles and streaming, but you can just go to their site and buy the vinyl and the CD or the digital immediately.
That's what I believe. But because of what I was saying. God.
The irony here is when Rob's mentioned this 2007 period, that is stolen from that era of marketing when we called that windowing. What you would see is that on sites like RDO, which was Spotify before Spotify in America, the Black Keys and Taylor Swift would not be putting their record out on anything but physical and maybe iTunes, depending on it. And then they would allow it on streaming after the window was done. So it's very funny because all Even's model is just going, remember what we were doing 20 years ago? Retro, baby, fucking retro.
I've seen people do like having longer term exclusivity where like, oh, the vinyl has just an extra song or it has an alt version of a song.
Which was also what we were doing in that like, a good example is like you look at 2002, it's like, Jimmy Eat World, exclusive songs at the end of their vinyl and things like that. And that's
people
the only way.
Songs too, they had like negative time songs on CDs where you could like have it be negative.
And what's interesting is a lot of those songs aren't on Spotify now. Because when people bring them over, they go to do it. There's a record I was going to listen to recently. I was like, oh, yeah, that song. And it's like, nope, just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And then, whereas now you have, like, I'm a Robot did a really fun one called Ex-Girlfriends and Black Jettas about how every girl you ever dated drives a black Jetta at the time. That's now just seems like it's on the record, and it feels very odd on the record just going right into it instead of a big, long break to show they're not being silly here.
But she's probably still driving a Jetta.
It's possible. I mean, she sounded real broke girl.
But, so then, okay, so where are you guys seeing, this is kind of a question for the room, where are you guys seeing the best ways to kind of turn fans into evangelists? Because I have kind of my theories on it, which we can get into, but I'd love to hear how you guys are thinking about turning fans from like someone who likes this record into someone who's actively talking about this record.
Let's see. It's funny because I had to think about it for a second, just because it's really theoretically the same old thing. It's really just going and meeting the person and talking to them and getting them to really kind of help. But it's the show itself, and it's getting people at the merch stand. And then, so you start there, right? You got to start with the people you know and the people that you have. And then you've got to create them. You've got to ask them to help, right? No one's going to help unless you ask them, right? People don't mind. So what if 90% of them say no? It's the 10% that are going to matter, right? And I guarantee that if you're a band and you're asking your fans to help, I guarantee they're not going to say no to you, right? Some just won't help. You know, we even saw that with street teaming, right? If you had 200 kids on your team, maybe 75 were really doing the work, if even. But that didn't matter because the people that you sent it to, they would hand it out or they would eventually get it to people and stuff like that. You're asking people to just help. And then, by the way, eventually back then, I'm talking in the early 2000s, companies sprung up that were doing it. Speaking of, System of a Down's manager, Dave Bino, he actually had a company called Streetwise. And there were probably tons of people that were street teamers through Streetwise. And there was another guy, John, who actually, again, he was the guy I mentioned for Static X. He started a company called Band Bitch back then. And again, and StreetTeam.net. And all these guys were doing this stuff. But these were the guys that were just, and what they would do is they would just, hey, do you want to join the team? Okay. What if I send you a brick of stickers and a bunch of this stuff, right? Literally the easiest thing you can do to start creating a group of people is stickers with a QR code on the back, right? Let's just go. Let's go as old school as it is, because once people will scan that,
the primary
say, hey, join the street team right here, and people are going to go, well, I wonder what do I get here? It could be the precursor to even a fan club at that point,
Is the primary motivation for the fan to do, outside of just like I love your music and I'd love to help, like is the kind of incentive there for them, like, oh, I'm gonna get to hear some stuff early, I might get some free merch items along the way, like is that just is that the way you would potentially approach it?
It's kind of like the poor man's version of when someone joins your Patreon or when someone has a street team, right? In other words, they're there to be part of it, and the second you activate them or something that you're doing, they get to be a part of it. They get to hear something, even if it's just a day or two ahead of time. And you know what? Here, I'm going to send you, my theory would be most bands, even if you have an existing fan base, just 2 days ahead of time. If you have say you have a VIP list of people who have paid to hang out with you and do your meet and greet, for fun, you know what? 2-3 days before, send them a track you're about to release ahead of time. Freak them out. They're going to be like, what? I didn't pay for this. This is great. And just give it to them.
Yeah.
Because you know what? They're still gonna once it goes on Spotify in 2-3 days, they're gonna start listening to it there. But until then, they'll listen to it in the method that you gave it to them. It's not gonna stop people from going to where they always go. It's just gonna give them that extra treat.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I have seen bands get precious about not wanting
Jesse,
to,
what are your
give their
favorite tools for
fans
this sort of thing?
stuff.
well, I mean, I think my big thing is I actually don't think it's a tool. It's narrative. It's that the real reality is getting people seeding conversations and getting people to talk about things that makes them feel like they need to know who you are and the fundamentals of this. It is that when people feel like there's always one answer to this, like, oh, I'm going to Aura Max, I'm just going to make mysterious things that everybody talks about. It's like, well, a lot of your fans are done and they need some of that explained, what your symbolism is, so that we have to go a level down from that. Then for other people, this is like literally like a great example of this. Did any of you follow the Tiffany Day controversy this week?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain it, Matt?
You should break it down, Jesse. I've been going insane.
Matt, let's be honest. Let's be honest. You didn't pay attention to it. You just say yes every time I say this. Every time I say, have you done this? You've never said no one time in your life. You can't explain it because you don't know what it is. Let's be real here. Okay, Matt. Let's hear it. Let's hear the controversy.
It's been a while since we ever had a good Jesse Matt roast.
Let's hear it, Matt. Every time I know you're bullshitting about knowing something, I'm doing this to you from now on.
Is this my life now?
Wow,
I'm waiting for it, Matt.
I'm trying to start looking her up right now.
Okay, so since Matt it just says yes every time I say this.
Okay, I read the article. I was at a conference. Okay, so I don't have it in me to explain it. Go ahead.
Sure. Anyway, another artist named Fawn Burke basically said this bitch ripped off all my creative. Now, in Fawn's examples, it is the most generic things like girl laying in ball in snow. Like 9,000 artists haven't done this before. But the big thing being now is this record, which is a very good record. I've listened to it 6 times since Friday. Many people are saying album of the year. There's already memes about it being album of the year. And I don't know that I'm going to go album of the year, but I think it's a good record. The point being, because she has the goods and proof of concept, she is going to do quite well, because what this now did is it brought any attention at all, and it gave idiots something to talk about. I then, because of Elon's Twitter, basically whenever you interact with a conversation on Instagram or Twitter, what then happens is you interact with one dumb thought, it will show you 20 more replies to it for the rest of your day. And now, because of that, I have seen every single interpretation of this, and this whole cult of pop music discussion now has to have an opinion on it. When you concede even things that feel like losses. When I first read the Tiffany Day controversy, I was like, oh, she goofed. And then I look at the details and I'm like, oh, this is like the most, this is basically being like, I can't believe we should never listen to Linkin Park. They rapped just like Judgment Night, to go back to Rob's old opinion. It's like, yes, clearly they heard a record that millions of people listen to. They're doing a thing that a lot of people have done before. It's not a ripoff to do generic bullshit. But, then when we looked at the thing, she did get her producer from hearing Fawn Burke's music, and she wrote that producer, said, I love what you do with Fawn. So there was like some validity, and now it makes the conversation. Any narrative that is talking that is not you did a song called Heil Hitler is a good narrative at this point, basically. And even when you did a song called Heil Hitler, you can still sell out SoFi 2 times last week. It's just getting people talking. That's what moves culture now. And that's the Kardashian trick.
Hopefully he gets kicked off wireless. Not that I'm a fan of that happening to artists, but in that case, yeah.
But this might be the exception.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, as you were describing it, I pulled up the Tiffany Day thing, and you're right. It is very much like, oh, I laid in the snow for my cover art, and then later she laid in the snow for her cover art, and I guess there happens to be she used the same
Yeah,
producer
maybe the
that she
producer said
used.
lay
Yes.
in the
I think that's
snow.
what.
You know what I mean? You just don't.
Yeah, so like even if the producer was like maybe I don't know, that's not that crazy of an idea to blame someone for ripping it off. It's not like she stole
Well,
her lyrics and her melodies and her.
Well,
it,
I actually, but that was the producer's fault.
Well, and it all depends. You got to get deeper into it, right? Nowadays, the producers actually are creating the beats, and they have a lot of the pieces to it, and they're putting it all together. So, whose is whose, what is what? You'd have to kind of really dig deeper into it to know the structure of it all. You know?
Yeah. So like the modern day, like I think sending fans early music, because physical media is not really trendy. Like there's obviously pockets of people that still will want free plus shipping and handling funnels, or they'll want other physical media and stuff. But like I think the digital downloads are super niche. Early access to music on a streaming link, like you said, a private SoundCloud link, I think is like a cool way to like something that fan can share around, right? Because if they send them a private SoundCloud link and say, "This is for you because you're a fan. If you have any friends that would dig this, feel free to send it to whoever you want." Though this is not like a special. It's not like a private
Well, and
link.
I
It's
always
for
believe in
you and your
soft
friend.
launching it because that way, let's be honest, right? It's all about kind of that way you can at least monetize it early, quietly. You know what I mean? So you have a little bit of that too on that side if you're just soft launching off of one platform. You know? Because like you were
Right.
saying before, listen. I'm a huge fan of, like I said, I'm a huge fan of if DSP is radio, then yeah, I would three or four songs into doing singles on DSPs, dropping a record, right, making the whole thing digitally available on Bandcamp, or another site, and selling it physically, selling the record. I know. I believe A Day to Remember did a version of that with their last record recently, whereas they put a couple of songs out and then you
yes.
were able to get the whole thing before they were done putting it out. Because I'm
Mm.
just
Yeah.
very, and I hope they change it one day. But I'm just very upset that the DSPs hold you to 50% of a record is what you could release ahead of time. Therefore, half of your music does not get a chance to get playlisted, to get its moment in the sun, right? The thing that again, this is the old guy in me for a second. The thing I miss is, in the end, off Hybrid Theory, that song came out a year after, or almost a year after the record came out. We focused on that track. We had a real focusing on it. It's when you decide to focus
But
on it.
it, But isn't that the mark of like a lot of if you have a real mainstream hit? Like I remember there's this big thing that Rick Beato and Ted Gioia started to be like, look at this statistic that most music listened to is catalog music. But the problem with where they drew the line of catalog music was when it had come out 18 months before. But the problem you had was you'd have Dua Lipa and all these big records that were on the pop charts, and they had come out 18 fucking months later. And at the 2 year mark, they were still having songs in the top 10. And it's like, you can't call that catalog music. That's present day promoted music. And when you really do a record that really pops, like I remember there's like this great study that like the 9 month mark should be your peak of record sales if you're really, really doing it, whether it was like Phoenix, Appetite for Destruction, things like that, that they really hit then. And then you have a long tail of years. And obviously that record was a game changer of that proportion.
Well, and that's what that was. You almost relied on the fact that you always had a chance to push your record, right? Somewhere along the way, right? And then all of a sudden it switched. And by the way, listen, we can bemoan it all you want. It is what it is now, right? Because it's just, no one's, everything now has every song now in my mind has a 10 to 15 day shelf life, right? It's what you created afterwards, right? I try to spend a lot of time now on my records that in the current system where you put a whole record up on DSP. Whereas I want to refocus on certain songs, right? I want to create all if there's a song that hasn't gotten put out on DSPs, but it's on the record that way, that I want to spend time telling all my fans about that song and why it matters to me. And you have to spend that time. Usually, what I want to attempt in the future is when a record comes out, or like when a bunch of songs come out, if I have to do it record-wise, I will then spend the next 2-3 weeks per song over the next 10 whatever times to drag out the record and get everyone to understand what the record really meant and what's behind the songs and what is it and how do you really get someone to really relate to it, you know? Because I believe it takes for someone to turn into a fan, and again, I just use this as a general rule. I believe it takes 3 songs still. I always believe that, and I always will. When you first hear a song, you're just like, oh, the song is great, you know, for a band. Then you hear the next song, you're like, it's not as good as the last one, but yeah, it's kind of cool. That third song better be the one to drag them into your world, or they're just going to be a passive listener of yours from that point forward. Now, of course, there's differences. You can go 4 or 5, all of a sudden another hit, all of a sudden this, that. I use it as a general rule, you know?
Yeah, we should clarify for people is it doesn't need to be 3 in a row. But what I've seen as well is that you will see these bands. Everybody's like, "This is AstroTurfed, right, Jesse? Look at their numbers. They have no followers on social media yet." But what you see is that people don't follow. You're just another song on a playlist when it's one song. When you've gotten 3 songs that people have liked, you tend to see them be way stickier and way easy for them to get that actual follow, the subscribe, things like that. You've now given me a fix enough times that I want to make sure I don't miss it.
It's like a modern day one-hit wonder.
Yes, yeah, that's a great point.
Well, I mean,
like
but
you have this song that's like doing really well, and even algorithmically, Spotify's pushing it out really hard regularly. And then you'll look at that artist on like other platforms, and it's like, oh, they have like a crazy amount of monthly listeners for how little followers they have here, and their Instagram and TikTok are kind of dead. And it's just because they don't have a lot of fans; they have a lot of like impressions or like fans of that song, but they don't have a lot of fans of themselves as an artist, like in the whole package.
And it took the music industry 5 years to figure out that you needed 3 songs, not just a TikTok hit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all those TikTok artists.
You may have been giving them a lot of credit that they figured this out.
If you love this podcast, please remember, we have bills to pay. So about half our content is going behind a paywall for $5 a month. So now you can get the full interviews and 2 to 3 extra segments a week from us where we discuss what our members vote on, all sorts of good stuff. We really appreciate it. It helps us keep doing this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. We're trying to get this to go as far as it can. So please start a conversation with a musician friend by sending it to them.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast app. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss our uploads every single Thursday. And if you can, rate us on Apple and or Spotify, wherever you listen. It helps us a ton. Tune in next week for more.